BOEM, Oregon. Oh, let's go ahead and start that welcome again. Good morning and welcome everyone to the BOEM, Oregon Intergovernmental Renewable Energy Task Force meeting. We're starting here at 9 o'clock. And the first thing I'll ask you to do is there's a poll that will appear on your screen, and to select your affiliation and then select submit. That gives us an idea of who we have in our meeting today. And we'll share the results a little bit later in the meeting. So a poll should have popped up, and all you got to do is just take a moment. I see some quite a few responses coming in, so we'll keep that open for just a few minutes. And while we do that, I have a few opening remarks for you. So let's go ahead and go to the next slide. Great. So first I want to introduce myself to everybody. I'm Jamie Damon with Kearns & West. I'll be facilitating our meeting today. We've got a few minutes of just some protocols and before we actually get started. Gary Oliver, I see that your hand is raised. Do you have a question for us before we kick off? Hey, Bianca and Ariel, is Gary Oliver? I see his hand is raised. Well, Gary, I will just loop back to you. So for task force members, we've got some instructions. This is a webinar that we're doing. And so we ask that you click the mute button at the bottom of the screen to mute yourself when not speaking. To enter the discussion queue, use the raise your hand button or press *9 on your phone if you're calling in, and then lower your hand once you're done speaking. If you're unable to speak, use the chat to ask a question or for technical assistance. Please refrain from using the chat for sidebar conversations. We're keeping the chat open for the task force during the meeting. And so if you're having trouble asking a question or you're having trouble raising your hand, you can use the chat to let us know and I'll read the question. But otherwise, we really don't want to have a side meeting going on through the chat. So please only use it if you absolutely need to. The Q&A webinar feature is reserved for public attendees. Welcome to all of our public. I think we have well over 200 folks attending today. So really wonderful turnout for task force and our public. BOEM staff may respond to questions and comments only during the public input opportunities. And I'll go through the agenda here in a little bit. Task force members are encouraged to keep their webcam on during introductions and the discussion portions of the task force meeting. Closed captioning is available. You can see that at the bottom of your screen. If you click on CC, then you'll have the closed captioning option available to you. If you're having any technical difficulties, you can contact Ariel Adalin at adalin@kearnswest.com. And her phone number is 971-347-1757. If you're experiencing technical difficulties, you can give her a call. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So for public attendees, again, welcome to all of our members of the public who are joining us today. Public attendees will be muted through the task force meeting and will not be able to unmute themselves. Public attendees can share verbal comments during the public input opportunity after the meeting adjourns at 12:55 p.m. Let me pause there for a moment and just explain that a little bit. So this is not a Federal Advisory Committee Act meeting, so it's not a FACA committee, and which means that we need to we need to close the meeting before we open it up for public comment. And so task force members are encouraged to stay. BOEM members will stay, of course, to answer questions. So we'll be taking public comments at 12:55. And at that time, the public can, we can unmute you, you can ask your question, let me pause on that. You can use the Q&A webinar feature for questions and input to BOEM throughout the entire meeting today. So for members of the public, you'll see there's a Q&A button on the bottom of your screen. You can press that. You can write a question into the Q&A. We'll be tracking those throughout the entire meeting. BOEM will be doing their best to answer either live or in writing. We will do our best to answer as many of the questions as possible. And when we open the meeting at 12:55, when the meeting adjourns at 12:55, we open for public comment at 1:05. Then we will start with the questions that are in the queue. Closed captioning is available to the public, so you can click the closed captioning and you can see the writing on the bottom of your screen. And again, for the public, if you're having technical assistance requests, you can contact Ariella Dolan at adolan@kernswest.com or 971-347-1757. So let's see here. A few ground rules. We have an agenda that's very focused today, so we would ask that you honor the agenda. We'll walk through that here in just a moment. We ask for task force members to participate actively and respectfully. We do have a good chunk of time set aside for discussion and Q&A from task force members. We would ask that you provide your name and affiliation each time that you speak. There will be differences of opinion and perspectives, and we ask that you respect those. Please stay on mute when you're not speaking, and refrain from sidebar conversations and refrain from using the chat for sidebar conversations. Let's go ahead and go to the next slide. So we have a few opening remarks from Director Klein, so I would like to go ahead and introduce Director Klein.
Great. Thank you so much, Jamie. Just checking everybody can still hear me. Sounds good. Great. Well, thank you all for gathering here today. My name is Liz Klein. I'm Director of the Bureau of Ocean Energy Management, and really pleased to be able to help open up this task force meeting today. I regret that I won't be able to stay with you for the whole day, but I have a fantastic team on the line from BOEM who will be here. And I want to just extend special thanks to Doug Boren for his leadership throughout this process. And I'm just, again, so pleased to be able to open us up this morning. You know, as many of you likely know or have heard in past task force meetings, this particular group was convened formally way back in 2011, which was during a time when the renewable energy program at BOEM was really getting up and off the ground. And certainly from the Biden administration's perspective, this program continues to be critically important to address the challenges we're facing from climate change. The President and Secretary Haaland have said many times that you know, the climate crisis is real, and it's our responsibility to do something about it. And so BOEM is really proud to play a role in that in terms of helping to facilitate offshore wind development in the US on all coasts at this point. And so we're really excited about the efforts here in Oregon. I really I'm pleased also to see SL Karen's face briefly from the state of Oregon. We really value our partnership with the state of Oregon, and part of the reason we're here today is certainly as a result of the great coordination we've had with Governor Kotek on these issues, and she requested that we hold this task force meeting, and we're of course happy to do that, and want to use this forum to talk about the 2 draft wind energy areas that have been identified offshore Oregon. And this is also an opportunity for everyone to talk a little bit about BOEM's overall process, which can be, has a number of steps along the way. At its really foundation, from my perspective, I explain it a lot as this process that you are in right now is really meant to try and identify the areas offshore on the Outer Continental Shelf that hold the greatest promise for offshore wind, but also the greatest promise for minimizing the amount of conflicts early on, right? So that when we finally get to the leasing process and there are real companies proposing real projects, that the number of conflicts that those projects will face at that time have been minimized to the greatest extent that we can. We know that the ocean is an incredibly important place to so many people, to so many communities, It serves a lot of uses. I've been saying a lot now that there is perhaps there's no square inch of the ocean that someone doesn't care about. But this process really is meant to be a winnowing process where we identify those areas that might hold the greatest promise for the least amount of conflicts while still allowing this type of development to go forward. So as I said, from the Biden administration's perspective and Secretary Haaland's perspective, this whole effort really is meant to address the climate crisis, to help build out our goal, the president's goal of 30 gigawatts of offshore wind energy by 2030 and 15 gigawatts of floating offshore wind by 2035. We know that Oregon has some of the best offshore wind resources in the world, but again, we want to make sure that we're doing that responsibly and sustainably, and public input really is critical in that process. And so, you know, the knowledge that we've gained throughout these task force meetings, throughout the really decade of engagement that has taken place, has helped to inform where we are today. We announced those draft wind energy areas, as you all, I'm sure, know, on August 15th, which kicked off a public review and comment period. Again, that's another really important opportunity. You know, we heard public input from the call stage, and even before the call stage, and during this comment period, on the draft wind energy areas. It's just another great opportunity to further refine the information that we gather and engage directly with tribes, with ocean users, with stakeholders, and all of you represented here today. I also just want to say that through all of that engagement, we heard calls for, you know, some more time to do that engagement. We, hearing that, extended the wind energy area comment period to 60 days. And that was something we heard directly from the governor and also from members of your congressional delegation. So we did that to make sure that we have some additional time for engagement and public feedback. Also, you know, holding in-person public meetings was also something that we heard as being important. And so we're doing our best to be responsive on that front as well. What I also want to convey, I think, in discussions that we have around the country about BOEM's process, this really is still an early part of the process. The identification of wind energy areas, the draft wind energy areas, again, we'd move from here theoretically to final, and from there would start a sale process for a lease sale. But even then, the provision of leases to, you know, developers who might be interested in projects in those areas, you know, it doesn't, that the provision of a lease doesn't give a right to build a project. There's still a number of steps from there that help inform, you know, the future, a future project that may or may not get built on the OCS. So, which is all to say, I just want to make sure that folks know that we hear all of the input, we receive all of the input that we get. There are lots of opportunities throughout this process for folks to be engaged. I hope you know that we really do take all of that feedback very seriously. And we know that in order for this whole effort to be successful, it really is making sure that we are engaged in this respectful process where we're getting out into communities and hearing from folks directly. So again, I just want to say, you know, as part of the process, if we identify final wind energy areas, there will be more opportunity, including through the National Environmental Policy Act process that we will undertake. And you know, those wind energy areas can be further reduced before we ever got to a sale notice. So thank you again to all of you for committing this time to engage today. Thank you to, you know, I know that it takes a lot to spend time doing these engagements. And so we're really very grateful for all of the feedback that we get. And we do take all of that to heart and make sure that we are being as responsive as we can. Certainly on behalf of Secretary Haaland, we're just, you know, again, feel strongly about ensuring that we can build a successful renewable energy program at BOEM and a successful offshore wind industry in order to address the real climate challenges that we're having across the country. So thank you again. I see Doug's face. So again, I just want to say a special thanks to Doug Boren for his leadership here. And he is going to helm the BOEM ship, as it were, for today's task force meeting on our behalf. So thank you again. And thank you, Jamie, and the team at Kearns West for your help too today. And I look forward to working with all of you now and in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Director Klein, and thank you for being here today. Now I'd like to turn it over to Karin Power from Governor Kotek's office. Karin, welcome.
Good morning. Good morning, everyone. My name is Karin Power. I'm the Natural Resources and Climate Advisor to Governor Tina Kotek. This morning, I want to say thank you to BOEM, our federal agencies, and members of the public for tuning into this task force meeting. I also want to thank our state staff, especially Andy Lanier from DLCD, for sharing their expertise along the way. It's been an enormous lift over the last couple of years, and our office is looking forward to listening and learning today. I appreciate the stakeholders and members of the public who will also be sharing their thoughts later today. Finally, to make sure that we're on track, I'll say I want to thank Director Klein and Doug Boren for their collaboration, our Legislative Coastal Caucus, who continues to engage with our office in these opportunities, and to our state agencies for working together to share their expertise, educate the public. We look forward to continued partnership on exploring offshore wind in Oregon now and in the future. Thanks.
Thank you, Karin. So now what I would like to do is begin our introduction.